The sudden death or removal of Russian dictator Vladimir Putin likely won't hasten the end of the war, but will create additional risks, according to an analytical article in Newsweek. The publication notes that security measures surrounding Putin have recently been significantly strengthened in Russia. According to European intelligence, the Kremlin leader is increasingly confined to his bunkers, fearing an assassination attempt or a coup d'état. The number of checks within his inner circle has increased, his circle of trusted confidants has been reduced, and communications and travel have been restricted. Against this backdrop, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy stated that the Kremlin is nervous about possible Ukrainian drone attacks during the May 9 parade in Moscow. However, as noted, the greatest threat to Putin may come not from outside, but from within the Russian system itself. The publication states that over the course of a quarter of a century, Putin has been building a system in which he is the arbiter, patron, and final judge. He pits elite groups against each other, forcing them to compete for his favor, the key to wealth and success in modern Russia. Almost nothing politically important happens without his direct or tacit approval, the authors write. At the same time, they note, Putin has accumulated enormous personal power, significantly weakening the influence of institutions and individuals around him. He has become the center of Russia's political universe, and his sudden disappearance could create a black hole into which the entire system would be sucked. The publication agrees that Ukraine poses a serious threat to Putin. It claims it has already demonstrated its ability to strike deep into Russia, particularly in Moscow, using drones or special operations involving car bombs. But the biggest threat to Putin is likely to come from within the mafia state he has created, from an ambitious rival who sees an opportunity to exploit the economic crisis and the failed war against Ukraine, the article says. The publication believes that the potential for such a scenario already exists. Just recall June 2023, when fighters from Yevgeny Prigozhin's Wagner PMC seized the headquarters in Rostov-on-Don and moved on Moscow. According to a U.S. intelligence report, tensions have increased between Russian security agencies regarding the protection of high-ranking officials from potential assassination attempts. Furthermore, the intelligence report indicates that the Kremlin is wary of the influence of former Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu. This is evidenced, in particular, by the arrest of his former deputy, Ruslan Salakov, in March 2026. The publication named several individuals who could potentially replace Putin, whether naturally or through conspiracy. These include Putin's former bodyguard and aide Alexei Dyumin, the Kremlin's domestic policy overseer Sergei Kiryenko, and Deputy Prime Minister Dmitry Patrushev. At the same time, it is noted that representatives of the old security elite, such as former Secretary of the Russian Security Council Nikolai Patrushev or FSB Director Alexander Bortnikov, are more likely to be those who block certain candidates than contenders for power. But none of these names address the system's core problem, the indispensable role of Putin himself. He unites various factions, balancing them through patronage and fear. And the question arises, who is capable of recreating or reforming such a system, the authors ask. According to the Constitution, in the event of Putin's death, the Prime Minister, currently Mikhail Mishustin, will become acting president. But, as the publication suggests, behind the scenes, a brutal power struggle will immediately begin between the elite clans of the nuclear and highly militarized state. The authors note that Russia is not a parliamentary democracy, where an opposition politician can simply come to power through elections. Russia is a military autocracy, where key roles are played by the security services, military commanders, presidential guards, oligarchs, and regional elites, whose interests often conflict. Therefore, the authors suggest, the acceptance of a new leader by the Russian elite could prove problematic, given that institutions are weak and power is too concentrated in the president's hands. The successor who can intimidate the others will have the best chance of survival. And the argument that Putin's sudden departure could pave the way for a leader interested in lifting sanctions, ending hostilities, or improving relations with the West won't even work here, the publication believes. Although, as the publication suggests, this is possible at a later stage, after someone survives the initial wave of power struggles. Even then, it would require a radical shift in thinking within the system Putin has been building for over 25 years. Russia's structural weaknesses do not mitigate the risks. On the contrary, they could make the power struggle even more explosive, the publication believes. According to the Harvard Kennedy School's Russia Matters project, estimates of Russian casualties vary significantly, but one Western estimate, as of February 2026, puts the death toll at approximately 1 million Russians killed or wounded. This means the war has affected a huge number of families. Discontent could turn against the Kremlin, analysts write. But if the majority of Russians continue to blame NATO for the war, this will only intensify Moscow's anti-Western rage and aggression. There are also economic problems. Interest rates and inflation are extremely high, Russia's reserves are depleted, state resources are being diverted to support the war in Ukraine, and sanctions are having an impact. History shows that authoritarian societies with nationalist tendencies and poor economies often descend into hateful violence, the publication recalled. Demobilization will become an additional risk factor. Analysts at the Institute for the Study of War believe that the Kremlin already sees veterans as a potential threat to the regime's stability. A separate report by the Global Initiative claims that veterans of the war against Ukraine, including former convicts, are already fueling violence, organized crime, and pressure on police and social services. After the war, Russia will bring home hundreds of thousands of people traumatized and embittered by the brutal war and disillusioned by the impoverished world. A state simultaneously under military pressure, experiencing criminalization, and economic crisis may become less predictable, but no less aggressive, the authors believe. According to the authors, the West should not perceive Putin's possible fall as an automatic solution to the problem. Even if a new leader emerges after him, the system built on an aggressive imperial course and confrontation with the West could persist. Moreover, Russia's new leader could prove even more assertive, seeking to prove his strength after an internal power struggle. Putin's sudden death will end the rule of one man, but it will not destroy the system he created. The United States and its allies may strive for justice for Ukraine, but they must also understand that an uncontrolled collapse of Russian power will not be justice. This will be a crisis with nuclear weapons, armed groups, and a war that is already ongoing, the publication concludes. According to analysts, Putin's death may solve one problem, but it could create dozens of new ones.